Tarek, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Can I get the clicker from you? Can I grab the clicker? Yes. Perfect, thank you. So before we jump into the topic, I just want to introduce myself. I spent about 8 years at General Electric across various roles. Mainly my roles included building world-class infrastructure, advising our businesses to set up corporate processes, really. In the past year and a half, I've been the Chief Commercial Officer at Bayzat, where we're really building a business from scratch. So very different environment, but honestly, some of the challenges we are facing in terms of engaging millennials, myself being one of them, is unified across the board. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. Before we jump into that, I'm going to get some audience engagement. So I'm going to ask if you recognize the image. I'm going to ask that you raise your hand. Anybody recognize this? No? Okay, I mean, exactly, first computers. So this was introduced in the 1950s, so I wasn't expecting too many people to know what it is. I think we'll get a little bit more hands now. Anybody here? All right. 8-inch floppy disk, introduced by IBM in the 1970s. I think we're going to start seeing a few more. I heard an oh no, yes, that was the 1970s. I think we're going to see a few more hands now. Motorola, first mobile phone they invented. I think I'm going to expect to see all the hands now. How about this? All right, so I think we all know what the iPhone is. I mean, the key thing here is to understand the technology shift that's happened over the past few decades. When you think about the millennials in your businesses, almost half of them, this device here was their first phone ever. So they've grown up in an environment where their communication device is the iPhone and is the smartphone, right? So the first question is, why should we even care about millennials? How do you engage with them, given what we've talked about? And then how did we overcome some of those challenges internally at Bayzat? So when you think about millennials, Generation Y, this is a cohort born between 1980 to 2000. And when you think about the Middle East, about 60% of the population is under the age of 25, with half of that being classified as millennials. That's almost 100 million people across the Middle East. We're going through a very unique time. This is the single biggest shift to adulthood we've seen in the region's history. That presents, of course, some challenges. So when you think about this cohort in the Middle East, about 50% unemployment within the cohort. But when you look on a global level, about 80% of them will be in the workforce in the next coming year. So, I mean, how would millennials classify themselves? So a couple of adjectives they'd use to describe themselves. So they're people savvy. I mean, if you have 2,000 friends on Facebook, you have to be people savvy, right? Loyal to their employers, not so tech savvy, but hard workers. I mean, finding a job, after all, is hard work. Now, the flip side, when you ask HRs how they view millennials, it's a starkly different story. So not too people savvy, not really loyal to their employers, with 1% saying they are, but they do agree on one thing: they are tech savvy, right? So you're looking at a population that's going to be a big part of your workforce. I would say not very self-aware, but technologically savvy. So with that context in mind, you really have to rethink how you engage this group of young individuals. So how do they consume information today? So when you think about the shifting landscape, I mean, when you look at workstations first invented by IBM in the 1960s, less than 1% of the population had access to that technology device. When you look today, about 5 billion mobile phones, that's almost 70% of the population that has access to this device right here. By 2020, 80% of the world will have access to smartphones. So really, you're seeing a complete shift in terms of technology and how that impacts the way we communicate. So when you think about how much information we consume today, this is a very interesting visual. So 50% of the time we're awake, we spend consuming media or communication. So that's email, telephone, television, smartphones. So half of the time we're awake, we actually just spend on devices. Now the question is, how is that? What those devices, how have they changed over time? So as you take a look between 2010 and 2015, what you'll see is traditional medium is on its way down. So I think radio, I think newspaper, but mobile has increased over 400%. And this is really where we're spending time consuming technology. Now, as you think about this device, I mean, it's a supercomputer in your pocket. And what that really translates into is more frequent communication and information, but in shorter spurts. So the average human today gets 64 notifications. That's WhatsApp messages, Facebook posts, emails, 64. And what that's really translated into is a reduction in our attention span. So we've gone from 12 seconds attention span down to 8. For context, a goldfish has 9 seconds attention span, so I think it's safe to say we're really excelling as human beings right now. So now, what does it mean? What did it mean for us at Bayzat? So, I mean, before we talk about how we've overcome some of these challenges, it's important to understand our company. So Bayzat develops purposeful technologies to empower and simplify lives across many different facets. We've experienced amazing growth, thankfully, over 100% in the last 2 quarters. Generally young population and very diverse from a demographic standpoint. I mean, I think you guys can all relate in terms of HR. Getting millennials to engage in terms of HR processes can be challenging. And I thought what would be appropriate is talking about our own case study. So Sevla is our HR person. She joined recently, joined the company, super excited, walked into the startup, running into the office, this is awesome. She actually said that. Super pumped about being at a startup. Had grandiose ideas in terms of what she really wanted to build at the company. World-class benefit structure, a really good medical insurance benefit policy, employee onboarding. The reality was a little bit different. So what ended up happening is we really had a lot of paper processes, archaic processes. We had less than 20, even though we're a technology company, we had less than 20% of our employees actively engaging with our HR software, which obviously drives inefficiency. So we took a step back and we said, being a technology company, we really have to understand what would drive more user engagement on our technology platforms. And what it really came down to first is user experience. I mean, millennials have grown up in a world where they can order cars from their phone in the form of Uber, Facebook, so user friendliness is key. A new way of communication. I mean, I mentioned the attention span is drastically reducing, so we really have to rethink how we communicate and engage with millennials. And then lastly, I mean, mobile is the center of the ecosystem for them. It's a supercomputer in their pocket, and this is where they consume all their information. So whatever format we have has to be mobile. So internally in Bayzat, looking at those 3 things, we developed some technology in-house to address this. So first, we looked at user experience. So the problem with most HR enterprise software is it requires users to actually input data. So we flipped that on its head and said, we already have this information in hard copy in forms like passports, Emirates IDs. So what we actually do is we extract all that information just based on a simple bulk upload. So really reshifting the way we think about user experience and user interaction. After that, we looked at really simple and mobile. So an employee can access their employee profile on any device at any time, anywhere. So what you're looking at here is our mobile version of our HR enterprise software. And then lastly, a new way of communicating. So millennials want information wherever they are and when they need it. So what you're looking at here is actually our medical insurance module. And what this allows employees to do is access their policy, their hospital networks, their medical insurance benefits in a very easy and intuitive way on any device. So again, rethinking in terms of how do we engage millennials in the workplace. And I mean, since introducing all this, we've really gone up to more than 95% system usage in a very short time frame. So I think it's safe to say it's been very successful for us. And I think you'd all be happy to know that Sevla is still alive and well and managing happily ever after. So thanks a lot for your time.